What? Action. So, I never finished the last story about, told you guys about the white Chevy 2, why I got in racing, why I got out of racing. Now I'm going to tell everybody why I got back into it. So, when I had my little Chevy 2, you know, I can proudly say that that car was only beat one time. Never would beat one time with the 427 in it. That's it. Never got outran other than that one time. So with 396 in it, when I had pump gas 8-to-1 396, I did make a race one time with dead spark plugs in it, and I fucking knew better, but it was just a buddy of mine, and I never heard the end of that, which is another reason I don't race for fucking free anymore. So, but what got me back into it? So all this time I was out of racing. Stacy and I got married, and I bought the Blazing Copper cart you guys see. And when I bought that Blazing Copper car, it was actually maroon and silver, and I just bought it to flip it. And then Stacy one day goes, I really think that car's cute, and I hear all these racing stories. You know, your brothers talk about it when you were street racing all the time, and you know, maybe you ought to build a car so we can go to the racetrack. So that's what started the Blazing Copper car. Part of the love-hate relationship that I have with my wife. Yeah, glad you think that's funny. But that was just, I've always had fast cars and always played with them. But what got me back into racing was Sean Ellington, Murder Nova. So I'm in a friend of mine's shop one time, Bo Woody, and they were talking about this guy with a black Nova, fastest street car in Oklahoma, blah, 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 would race anybody on the street for 10 grand. And I'm like, is that for real? That guy got 10 grand, he put on a race? Bo said, oh, well, yeah, absolutely he does. I said, he'd really race. He said, oh yeah, he'd really race. So, I decide I want my title back. Dumbest fucking thing I ever could have done. I'd probably be retired. I'd be a fucking millionaire right now if I hadn't got back into it. But, so I watched these videos of this car, and I'm like, yeah, that car's fast, but, and I actually went to Thunder Valley and did some recon. And I watched Sean go a 503, and that's back when we had the Pro Charger and stuff in it. And I'm like, fuck, that car is fast. But I'm on Racing Junk, and I had seen, and I told one of my customers about it when I had the shop open to the public, about this 66 Chevelle that had a 765 with 3 folding kits on it, Charlie Buck motor, blah, 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 and it was for sale for like 40 grand, 45 grand, something like that. And I'm looking at this car, and the car read 490s on one gun, 480s on 2, 470s on 3 on a 33 105W. And I thought, man, double frame rail car that we took to Virginia and won the Virginia Street Outlaw deal with. And I'm like, man, that car's 40 grand. I'll bet I get it bought for 35, 32, and I'll get 10 of it back outrunning that guy with the Nova. So I start talking about getting this car. And then I actually drove down to Texas, looked at it, tried to do some trading with a guy on it. He wasn't interested. Cameron's his name. And I went and looked at the car, and it was a super cool car, and I kind of dropped it. And then it got to wearing on me. One day I called Stacy and said, hey, so I think I'm gonna buy that Chevelle down in Texas. And she said, what? It's like a year later, and I still got this car on my head. She said, what? I said, yeah. She goes, well, wait till I get home and let's talk about that. I said, okay. So she gets home and she says, well, why don't we flip for it? I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you say everything's based on fate, so let's put it to fate. Let's flip for it. If I win, you don't buy the car. If you win, you buy the car. Okay, good enough. And I was on the fence about buying it anyway because it was a race car. And that was the first true race car that I could not drive on the street that I would ever own. The very first. And so we flip and I win. So Stacy, in her ultimate wisdom, says, well, you know, really we should go 2 out of 3. I said, hell, let's push it the whole way. So I flip it, she loses again. I call the guy up. I said, hey, brother, I'll buy that car, but I'm not driving back to Texas. And I said, I would give $25,000 cash for that car, but you gotta bring it. He said, call you right back. Call me back in about 10 minutes. He said, car's yours, I'll be there Sunday with the car. So he brings the car up, and you know, he brought all the extra jets and all the stuff. Super, super great guy. And he was one of the smart ones that decided spending all that money on a car was not smart. And I was the dumbass that bought it and started this shit all back over again. So when I buy this Chevelle, oh, funny story about the quarter. So when Cameron comes in and signs all the paperwork, I pay him for the car, Stacy walks over and hands him the quarter. He goes, what was this? She said, tell him. So I told him the story about the flip. And she said, I don't want that quarter nowhere around us ever again. Then I ended up with Reaper, pulled the motor out of the Chevelle, put it in Reaper, and started racing. Just me and my brothers playing around. Went on the show that one time. You guys notice who I called out? John Ellington. Fucked up. Not a problem if I would have been smart, because when I put that motor in Reaper, it ran 480 on 1, 470 on 2, 460s on 3. And it was just getting faster and faster. And like a dumbass, I raced the man and not the surface. And that was the season preview for like 3 seasons, me almost flipping that car the first time when it was black. So that was the thing at No Prep Kings. All the times that Sean Ellington and I have raced, one, every time we bet money, he's won. Every time we haven't bet money, I've won. So, but we've always had jacked up, screwed up, sideways passes, just shitty passes. Until No Prep Kings the last year that I raced. We both slept on the light. I foot braked the car because I was scared it was going to push through the light. And it was a badass race. It was a hell of a race the whole way. Best race that Sean and I have ever had. Sean Ellington, is one of the greatest guys. I've always liked that guy. He's always been 100% real. One of the only people on the show that never backdoored me one time and tried to save me from myself more times than I can count, but I wouldn't listen. I wasn't listening to what he was trying to tell me. So there's the story of why I got back into racing. All because some dumbass wanted that Master Street car in Oklahoma title again. And the funny thing was, well, they were street cars. They were all race cars. But now you know the rest of the Reaper story.